Alright, Diablo 4 Barbarians, this right now is currently the hands down best build in the game. Right now we're charging up and we're going to unleash a one-shot on the hardest difficulty boss in the entire game, which is the pit boss on tier 100. So, it's going to be the build guide. Keep in mind what I'm showing off could potentially get nerfed, and even if it does get nerfed, I have tested it without 30 points, because that's the main thing that you're really trying to hit, is to get 30 points into something on the skill tree, which once you hit that, you're going to do crazy amounts of damage. So this is my take on the Thorns Barb that originally originated on some Billy channel over in Asia, and then now everyone's kind of playing it over on the PTR, and we've basically made some adjustments to make the build way smoother. So for starters, let's go over something that's really important, which is the brand new key passive that makes everything possible. So what your goal is to actually spend as much fury as possible, and you're going to gain additional 10% thorns for 8 seconds up to 120%. And then casting a skill with a cooldown is going to grant you unhindered for 5 seconds. However, that part won't matter in our build because we use Whirlwind. We can ignore unit collision, meaning that we can just go through the targets. That's actually a pretty big deal for other builds. But then during this time, you deal 100% of your thorns as physical damage to close enemies every second. So basically, even though it's a thorns build, you are essentially going to deal damage by just being close to the enemy, so you don't have to wait for them to attack you, which kind of was a problem if you've ever played any Thorns builds, specifically on the bosses. So that is essentially what we are utilizing. Now, pretty much most of the time you will one-shot the bosses, but sometimes you may run into a situation where it takes maybe like 2 or 3 seconds, but for the most part you will be able to see the gameplay. I'll show you guys like a raw uncut footage. Most of the time though, you can one-shot it, but there are going to be times where like, yeah, it's going to take a couple seconds, so it's a little bit RNG if it does happen to register. So that's the main thing. The other thing that allows this thing to get an insane amount of damage is this. This is essentially what you are going for in the build. It's called Tough as Nails. It just gives you additional thorns, and then when enemies hit you, they take additional thorns as bleeding. So you're trying to get as much percent bonus to thorns as possible. And the interesting thing is that on all of our pieces of gear, we don't even run thorns. And you might be thinking, how are you making a thorns build with no thorns? Well, essentially, it just gives you so much damage that it is unnecessary. A lot of builds that are even, again, running in this gameplay, we don't have any of those crazy amounts of thorns on all the pieces of gear. We don't even play Razor Plate, which is very interesting. So this build actually has a lot more room to grow. Now, keep in mind, it could get nerfed. It's specifically at 30 points where it starts to go crazy, but even without 30 points, even if you cut the damage of this build by 90%, which is kind of what you may lose out on, it is a significant difference if you don't happen to have the 30 points in, but even at 26, the build was still very, very good. So let's say they nerf this build, it's still going to perform very well unless they completely delete it. They do like what they did with Victimize in Season 5, which is basically delete it in the game. And it is a brand new passive, so my guess is they want us to use it. So unless they completely gut their brand new key passive, this is definitely going to be one of the top tier builds, even again, if they divide the damage by like, 10. It's still going to be a very, very strong build, but keep in mind, you may not one-shot the boss every single time, but pretty consistently. I mean, max levels pit 100. Just want to go ahead and get that out of the way, that it is going to be considered a beta build, as in like we're still in the process of seeing if it's going to be good. But a lot of people wanted the build guide while I was showing it off, and here it is for you guys. But keep in mind, again, even with the nerfs, it's still going to be pretty strong, but you may have to fight the boss for 10 seconds. But honestly, a 10-second pit 100 is still incredible for a boss kill for any of you guys that have actually pushed into like the pit like 150s plus. Remember, they are updating it. Pit 100 is the max. So for starters, let's go over the skills, how we use them, and the other additions to make this a lot smoother than, again, the original build that popularized the Thorns Barb. So first off, Ground Stomp. This is going to actually increase our resources. We have actually put 2 points into it, and I'll show you guys on the skill tree why this is important. So it will proc Earthquake, which does give you some bonuses, but we don't actually run Rumble, so it's not going to require that. You can still see you can one-shot even without Rumble, which is originally how some people were showing off gameplay. They were like getting multiple Earthquakes and then trying to one-shot, but you don't need it. The build does far enough damage, but if we do need it, as long as we can one-shot the boss, I feel like we don't need to get any more damage. I mean, it's just, at that point, you're just flexing that you can show a bigger number, but in reality, it's much better to get more HP, right? So you don't get like wrecked by the stacks on the boss potentially. And then Whirlwind, this is a Thorns build, so yeah, Thorns, Earthquake, Whirlwind. I'm not sure what the name should be for this build, because it does kind of revolve around Earthquake, because it does give us damage reduction and more damage. But Whirlwind is essentially what's going to allow us just to go through the units and spend resources. And we're attacking really fast, so attack speed is actually a stat that you would want, not so you can attack more times with Whirlwind, but so you actually spend more energy. There's another variant if you want to play. I kind of want to make this a separate video, but if you really want to go crazy and just go crazy with the amount of resource, then go for a kick and then walk, there's another build. I'll make a separate video for that because it's way different. Then we run triple shouts, and instead of Wrath of Berserker, we run Iron Skin for survivability, but also activating any skill is going to give us that bonus. So the difference between this and the Harlequin build is Harlequin can keep up the shouts most of the time. However, if you rotate your shouts, it's going to be much better because you can actually get a lot more resources generated, so you don't run into the situations where you're kind of stuck. That's a huge issue that I noticed when I looked at the original variant of the build, which did not have a bunch of resource gen because it played Harlequin for resources. However, you can get resources with shouts as well, but it's kind of up to you with the variant that you enjoy. I recommend just trying out both, see what you like the most. But yeah, running all the shouts, then we're running the two-handed axe expertise. So try to rotate your shouts. Don't try to activate them and 100% uptime them, but kind of rotate through them. And then as far as our aspects and gear, so we are running the Grasping Whirlwind. It just gives you the ability to pull. It's kind of a nicer thing to have. There's actually another aspect that also lets you pull. If you want to drop aspect of the fortress, that's totally fine. But the main important thing to get is on every single thing, that utility bonus to Tough as Nails, get that masterwork. Once it's 30 and above, it becomes godly, like broken. If it's not there, you're not going to see crazy amounts of damage. My expectation is you're not going to be able to get it to like 30 plus and get the crazy amount of damage. They may nerf this a little bit, or they may completely kill the build. I don't know. It's kind of up to how Blizzard decides to handle this. But again, my assumption is that they can't really make it that bad, right? Because this is the brand new key passive the Barbarian got. That would just ruin whoever decided to make that. It makes it useless if they, remove all the ranks to Tough as Nails. So my guess is the 30 plus rank crazy multiplier will just go away, but it's still going to be pretty good. What you ideally want to try to get though in the helmet category, and like why I don't play Harlequin, is because the fury per second. Getting that, if you can get a greater affix, you only need one of them, but getting 2 pieces of gear, that's going to be your helm and your chest piece, to roll with it. You can also get it on your boots. That will basically upkeep your resources, because if you're going from pack to pack and you're holding down Whirlwind, which you want to do because you want to make sure those stacks keep on being able to be activated for the big bonus, you definitely want to try to get some fury per second. Otherwise, without resource, yeah, you drop off your stacks, and that's no good. And then pretty much the same thing all around. You do need resistances because we don't run Tyrael, so you need to get 1 resistance in every single piece. It doesn't have to be lightning in the chest piece, but just get your resistances capped however that happens. Whether you get a couple pieces of gear with all res or just 1 per, up to you. Strength is kind of like the nicer stat, but ideally masterworking, getting Tough as Nails is what you want on every single piece of gear. And then you can also get attack speed. It's not bad to get attack speed, but again, just make sure you guys are res capped. As far as like the offensive thing, usually damage to close is going to be kind of a nicer thing to have because you cannot crit with the build. And then again, just strength maximum life. You need to get armor 1 slot because you don't have Harlequin. But you can see, even with my resources, sometimes the resources can run out. And it's specifically against maybe even bosses where you're trying to charge up again. You can still see you're getting for like 26, infinite barbarian damage. Basically, very, very good stuff. In fact, shout outs to Rob. He actually had some clips where he was getting infinite damage. Like, it actually made an infinity sign in the actual damage. But there comes to a point where you might as well scale more HP so you can actually do more content a little bit faster for the build. But going into the two-hander here, you do want Needle Flare. It's going to allow you to do AoE damage with your Thorns. And then if you can, I know it says Earthquake size, but what you actually will get is Earthquake at chance to activate multiple times and duration. They have updated it, but Mobalytics has not updated on the website. I put a bunch of notes here for some of the things that they haven't updated, like they actually haven't added one of the runes, which is Zal over here. You want to run Yule Zal, which we'll get into once we get into it, but Needle Flare, very, very good. And then you want Doombringer for more HP, because more HP equals more damage. Then you run Aspect of Earthquakes. If you get ranks to Pit Fighter or any offensive stats, that's really good as well. But remember, don't get crit in the build. But Tough as Nails is really good. And also, you want to run 2 one-handers. Make sure that is set up for Whirlwind, because that's going to give you more attack speed, because you can get more attack speed on the tree as well. And you're going to be running one-handeds. Then Ring of the Starless Skies, it's going to spend our resources, and that's going to give us even more damage. Although this kind of hurts us in a sense because it reduces the resource cost. But it's actually fine, because even though in theory we get 50% resource cost reduction with this, you might think that, oh, okay, that's going to take longer to build up that big damage, right, when we have the key passive that wants us to spend more. The problem is if you don't run that, your resources just get deleted and you're going to be in a bad spot. If you want to run without Ring of Starless Skies, it is definitely possible, and then you can run another offensive aspect. And then you would need greater affix in like every single piece of gear, and still then you may still have resource problems. It is a huge deal to have this in the build, even though, again, we technically want to spend resources. And then we run Bold Chieftains, which just kind of helps upkeep our shouts a little bit more frequently, which is kind of nice. And you also want to try to get that lucky hit chance to make enemies vulnerable, as you still have Exploit and Barbarian for vulnerability, and another thing where Whirlwind can make things vulnerable, but against things that, you know, if you go to the boss, and sometimes you may not just one-shot it instantly, you may actually run into a situation where the thing isn't vulnerable, and it may take, like, instead of, 2 seconds, you might be a 5-second kill, but it's still good to have it. Then you get, like, the resource, the resource Warcry cooldown reduction, because that's the one that actually gives you damage. The rest of them, they do work, but like that's just going to give you the most bang for your buck, so you can move faster too. And then we also run Accelerating. We want to spend resources. Attacking faster equals more resources spent. And then again, you want to get the Earthquake duration or chance for double Earthquakes, and then aspect of elements here. And then one of them makes it so when you use Earthquake over here, this one over here, where is it? Ground Stop creates an Earthquake that does damage, and then you can deal more damage in Earthquakes. And there's another one over here where you take less damage in Earthquakes. Another aspect that I was considering changing, aspect of the Fortress is okay. Just makes so if you take a big chunk of damage, it kind of gives you that bounce back, potentially, especially with your Iron Stream, because that's going to give you the shield. Really nice in combination with that. But this is what I would say where if you really want to swap it, you can run another utility or any other damage reduction one, but there isn't a really good just flat damage reduction for the Barbarian, unfortunately. And then as far as the runes, we're running Yugioh. I know it says Kua, it's not in the builder website here. So the other one that you want to run is going to give you extra life equals more damage. And then we run Lith Yulm, so we can get the Druid's ability. Now, there is another option where you can also stand still to create the Earthquakes, but since you are moving around quite often, I found it to be it's kind of up to you if you want this petrification. I like it because it just kind of holds everything still, and since you can like pull in all the enemies, it makes it easier to hit because sometimes monsters move around. But there is another option if you want to. You can stand still and run the Earthquake one, which we can go into, which is at tech. So this is going to evoke the Barbarian's Earthquake, and unfortunately, yeah, like I said, they are still doing some editing here, so if I put it in, that's why it's not in the builder. But if you want to run the Druid Petrify, it's not that bad. It just adds crit, which technically doesn't work with this build, but it holds everything still, and that can kind of build up the stagger bar. Not that you really need it for this build, but if the monster's holding still, it does make things a little bit easier. But again, that one is actually a pretty good one as well, and even though you are technically moving with Whirlwind, if you go to a corner or you get kind of put into a wall, you can generate those Earthquakes, but again, it's not in here. That one is another great option as well if you want to play that. And when you are using your rune words in this build, put it inside of your weapons, as that's going to give you the most bang for your buck, because you want the rubies to give you that extra bonus to strength. I know it doesn't show it here, but like I said, a lot of build websites are still updating here. But if you don't have the rune words, you can throw in sapphires. Until then, it's just there's no like flat like damage, or you can't get thorns damage anymore there. And then you just put extra resistances, or if you need the extra armor, that's another option as well. As far as the skill tree goes, the first 2 points do not matter. I'll make this big so my mobile viewers can watch it a little bit easier. So the first 2 points don't matter. I like to put 1 point to all of them. This like bleed can help. There's like a defensive aspect if you want to run when like you are taking damage from a bleeding enemy. There's a couple other things in the Paragon board which help out with bleed, so I like running this. And then we're running this one to increase your maximum fury if we want to. It's kind of up to you if you want to run this. It just kind of helps out. It's not like you do more damage per fury, but it's just like there's extra points. These are like the three that I would say you can swap if you want to. And then this is where it makes the build so much easier. This extra fury with ground stomp is very, very nice to actually have. And then we run the one where it generates additional resource. This one here can give you fortification as well. If you want to run that, that's totally fine. And then run like 1 point into Iron Skin, and then run Toughest Nails and Outburst. So more HP, more damage, which is great. And then we want more HP here, because again, more damage. This is actually where we put 5 points into Warcry, because it gives us some more damage over here. More damage. And then we also get to heal. We get to increase duration of the shouts. If you do need more movement speed, you can run it. because Whirlwind does slow you down, but that's where you would take the points out of here. It's up to you. Again, having extra resource does make the build feel so much better. It's so much smoother. And then we want extra generation here, some damage reduction. We want increased damage. So we don't actually get No Mercy. No Mercy is actually a thing that you normally would see, but remember, Thorns cannot crit, unfortunately, so not going to help us out over here. There's also this one over here. If you want to put a point over here, I could easily recommend this. This will actually slow down the enemies when you actually inflict bleed on him. It is only healthy and injured, but most stuff dies in 1 second anyway, so there's like a quick point. If you do need the movement speed, because I do like having max movement speed, you can put more points into that, and you can take out any like sort of damage reduction or something like that. But thick skin, so extra fortification here, and extra damage once we are fortified, and then we want to run Duelist over here. So Duelist is great because it's going to give us extra attack speed. All of these are with like two-handed weapons, and we're going to be running one-handers here, and then the other ones are like, what is it, crit, and we don't crit in this build. And then lastly, we run the Barbed Carapace. So that is the brand new thing that I was showing off earlier. And then so now we are into the Paragon board. So this Paragon board only really requires you to get about like 220 points, which right now it's pretty hard to like get really good value out of all 300 points. So a lot of these ones where it says like 5% extra damage, you don't need to get those, or like there's extra resistances. You don't need to get all of those earlier on, especially like the all res is like definitely a good one, but there are some areas over here where it's just like extra armor and resistances, which will make it so you can roll the lowest roll on resistances and you're going to still be a-okay in the build. It's just that there's so many extra Paragon points in a lot of builds that you don't really need to put these in, but I'm going to go ahead and go over all of it real quick. But keep in mind, if you are still like in like the 200 Paragon point range, which is probably what most people would be at, it's totally fine. In fact, most builds will be pretty much a-okay at 220 Paragon points. Don't feel like you have to get it in all builds to get 300. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit better, but it's by such a small amount. It's like a bunch of small additive 5s versus getting like the extra bonus on a lot of these nodes where you get like 30 per point, and I've already maxed all of those, so there really wasn't anything to get. So that's just going to be something that I wanted to mention in this, as this is kind of one of my earlier like build guides for Season 6, and who knows, maybe they're not going to give us 300 points. We're going to change that, but there's a lot of points that you can definitely not put in, and the build will still perform very good. You can see in the gameplay, I'm only Paragon 230, so I'm missing 70 in the gameplay, but I just figured I'll fill it out here. So first off, we're getting Challengers, one of the best things in the entire game. We get all of the strength nodes because it starts giving us 600%. This is where the game gets crazy with damage. Definitely great over here. And then the next board we move into is the brand new Force of Nature, but we don't actually do Earthquake stuff. It's just a really good board. It's got extra resistances. It's got physical damage, which Thorns is physical. We take all this extra dexterity here because it's part of the bonus on Exploit. It also just applies vulnerability. So yeah, Force of Nature, Exploit, and then it doesn't really matter too much on the route in most circumstances nowadays. But you can also get Ire over here. Ire is great because it gives you damage while berserking, and that's why we don't have to roll any damage while berserking, and we will hit the bonus legendary node for Blood Rage, which is part of the build, which gives us another source of berserking. So this is great over here. And so yeah, Blood Rage and in Ire, perfect board over there. And then we have Ambidextrous, and we're gonna get Carnage. So while we are berserking, our crit's gonna increase our attack speed to go even further, and then we get all of this berserking. So again, we don't need to roll it on our pieces of gear. So it's like very, very beginner friendly to actually get all the stuff that you need. If you want to roll that on your gear, sure, that's fine, but then you would still take these nodes anyways. That's why I decided to roll like the damage to close, which is just like objectively just better in a lot of situations, because maybe you're not up 100% of the time berserking, but most of the time it's like really not that big of a deal. And then for our final board, we run Decimator with Revenge. So this is going to give us a bonus every time we make an enemy vulnerable, which is literally every time we hit an enemy, because we run the Exploit glyph. And then we're running Revenge over here, so it's dealing Thorns damage. It gets to ramp up. You could also run Rumble. So this is like the option that I decided not to go for, so you didn't have to like create those earthquakes. Most of the time, I'm not even really like bothering with the earthquakes, with the exception of like if I'm out of resource, I use Ground Stop, therefore it's going to generate an earthquake. Or if you're on the boss fight, sure, you can generate an earthquake right there as well. Keep in mind, again, it didn't have it in the builder, but it is tech. That's what you want to run in the rune words if you do want to run them. Honestly, you could get away with this build without it, but you definitely want to add at least Ground Stomp into the build to generate the earthquake, but you don't really need to have the rune words in this build. I feel like they're kind of small, but on the weapons, they're really not that bad because you don't have any like crit in the building. You see, we just one-shotted that boss again over here. It's just so great to see that. It's just so super satisfying. But anyways, guys, that's going to go wrap it up for the I think this is the best build in the game, period. But if it does get nerfed, I'll update you guys and let you guys know what we need to change. But more than likely what's going to happen is they will nerf the high end of the damage, and then we just throw in like Razor Plate, and if they ruin the Toughest Nails passive, then we're going to have a lot more things to mess around with. And the thing is that they are also making a Thorns Spiritborn build, like it's built into the actual class. So I don't know if they're going to nerf Thorns that hard. Even if, again, they nerf Toughest Nails, we'll still have some other options, and I'll update you guys if things do change. But let me know, guys, what you think of it, and if there's any ways to improve it, let me know, as it's a really fun build. Definitely have some fun with it. And if you need the planner, I'll link it down below as well. But hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, drop a like on it. If you're new here, hit subscribe to the bell so you don't miss out on other builds. If this one gets nerfed, I'll have another Barbarian video for you guys, which essentially is probably going to be an Earthquake Whirlwind build, because that is definitely where the game is going for Barbarian. Anyways, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.